So the writer of Boruto was recently interviewed and revealed multiple secrets about Boruto's manga, such as the fact that Momoshiki's ability to see the future isn't a Shinjutsu, it's something else instead. He also explained why the Shinjus behave the way that they do, and also touched on Boruto's evolving relationship with Sasuke. So as you can see, we have a lot to discuss, but of course, let's start from the top. Now, Ikimoto also explained the power Daemon felt within Himawari and how that ties into his ability to apparently sense future potentials. And this ties into his reflection ability as well, but I explained that in this video on screen that I released 2 days ago. So if you guys want to see the breakdown of that comment, go and watch that one after this one. With that said, the first question we're going to address is the one about the Shinjus. So the question is, how are the Shinju personalities and speech patterns determined? The grains have changed significantly from the original Shinki, but is there a reason for this? Now just to clarify, the grains mentioned here is referring to Ryu or Ryu, whichever one you guys want to use, totally fine, but that's because the name Ryu means grain in English. So the page is being translated to English from Japanese, so it's also translating the names themselves to the English version of the words. So just keep that in mind for anything that seems a bit confusing. Now the answer posed by Ikimoto, or provided by Ikimoto, says everyone has a public self that they present to others. This sociality is essential to living in society. But to the Shinjus, who have only just awakened to their own ego, do not yet possess this characteristic, and are primitive and true to their instincts. Even if the personality of the Shinju is different from that of the person they are based on, this may in fact be the true nature of that person. So in a sense, and if I was to, simplify this, the reason why the Shinjus behave the way that they do is because they are shameless. They don't care about societal norms or how they're perceived by people. They're in a sense their true selves, or what that person would be if they're not, restricted by their perceived societal norms. And I think I was onto this a few videos ago where I pointed out that all the Shinjus are kinda the opposite of the person they copied. For example, Ryu is a bit more sarcastic, a bit more playful, while Shinki is a bit more reserved and straightforward. Matsuri is a bit more daring, while Moegi is a tad bit on the timid side. Mamushi is also a bit more confident, a bit more brave, while Bug was cowardly and I would say self-doubting. Hidari seemed a bit foolish, a bit scatterbrained, while Sasuke was of course the opposite of that. Though when you look at it from the perspective of them being the true version or the true expression of the person, it makes a bit more sense. Like, Hidari isn't scatterbrained, he's curious, he's inquisitive, he wants to learn, he wants to know more. He's an introvert, just like Sasuke. He's also very sharp or keen. He was able to figure out that he needs the Sharingan to use the Chidori properly without anyone telling him. He did that just by learning about what the Sharingan is and knowing that he needs it to perceive counterattacks. So Hidari was never stupid or foolish, he was just a man of few words, and I think we kinda misinterpreted that. Now the one I find very intriguing is Jura. Jura is stated to be the incarnation of the Ten Tails, right? And Jura's personality seems a bit calm, composed, reserved, very patient. And is that the true nature of the Ten Tails? I mean, the Ten Tails was stated to be a mindless entity and it just ran around, blowing up stuff and, was screaming all the time. It just seems to be the opposite of Jura. Although I guess you could make the argument that, the Ten Tails has to be planted in the ground for over 3,000 years, several millennia, so it has to have extreme patience, okay? So I guess it does make sense for Jura to be this composed and patient. With that said, this could also play into my theory about, Jura being Kaguya's Ten Tails, or a clone of Kaguya's Ten Tails, which was created by Shiki from the remains of the Ten Tails from the war, similar to what Victor did with his god tree. And that is how Jura has this personality, because Kaguya merged with that Ten Tails, so Kaguya's will was incorporated into the Ten Tails, similar to what was stated in Naruto, by the way. The reason why the Ten Tails went after Hagoromo and Hamura was because of the will of Kaguya influencing the Ten Tails. So if the Ten Tails in Boruto is a clone of the Ten Tails from Naruto, it makes sense why Kaguya's personality would be imprinted onto Jura if he was to develop a personality. And that would explain his calm demeanor, very composed, similar to Kaguya. That's how Kaguya was. But of course, I could be wrong, we'll see. Now, the next question was what kind of information was written in the Book of Torah, which by the way should be Book of Jura, so keep that in mind. Ikimoto then says that the book he took out at the time is not in publication. It is instead Jura's personal notebook. It is filled with various information such as his daily discoveries, things that interest him, things he's curious about, and relationships between people. For him, it is an important tool for organizing the vast amount of information that grows with each passing day. So in a sense, the book that Jura read when he confronted Himawari and Team 10, I believe, isn't a book that he picked up from the library that coincidentally had information on Shikadai and the entirety of Team 10. No, it's a personal book that he just writes stuff into. So yeah, nothing crazy here, but thought you guys should know. With that said, the next question is about Momoshiki. So it says here, during the conversation with Amado, Boruto saw a vision of the future. Is there a connection between this and Kashin Koji's divine art, which is referring to prescience? And also, just to clarify, the scene he's referring to here is when Boruto saw the vision of omnipotence taking place in chapter 75, so keep that in mind. Hikimoto then says, that is one of Momoshiki's unique abilities, and it allows him to see fragments of the future surrounding him. It has some similarities to Juho, which is referring to prescience, but it's not established as a divine art, which is Shinjutsu, and is also considered to be inferior in terms of performance. Now, this confirms one thing, or multiple things. The first one is that some people theorize that what Boruto used to see the future back in chapter 75 was the Jogan and not Momoshiki's Byakugan. This pretty much confirms, it's right there, that what Boruto used was Momoshiki's ability, which stems from his Byakugan, of course. And it also confirms that Momoshiki doesn't have prescience. He has an inferior version of prescience that only allows him to see fragments of the future. Now, this is interesting to me because we've seen this in the past as well. I think it was chapter 74 or 75 where Momoshiki says that Boruto saw the same tableau that he was able to see. And a tableau is simply a group of models or motionless figures representing a scene, which is in a sense fragments of what you're trying to put together. So this isn't new when it comes to Momoshiki's ability, but what this confirms is that Koji is able to see the future in its entirety, and also in motion. Because we've always wondered if Koji is able to see the entire picture or just fragments of the future. So he doesn't know the play-by-play of what's about to happen, just the general idea. But this confirms that he is able to see the entire picture. Because if the distinguishing factor between his future ability and Momoshiki is that Momoshiki sees fragments, which makes it inferior to Kashin Koji's, then that must then mean that Koji is able to see more than just fragments. And this makes me look at Koji very differently because I've always been of the opinion that not that he's evil, but there are things that he's doing to manipulate what Boruto does in the future that he wants. So him not telling Boruto that Himawari had Kurama, him not telling Boruto that Himawari was the target of Jura, and him not telling Boruto that Jura might snipe him or try to sneak snipe him if he stands there to observe Hidari's Thorn Soul Bulb is all a part of his plan. It isn't that he didn't know or didn't see it in the fragments that he saw. He saw it, he saw everything, and he knows what's going to happen. So it's very interesting, and I think this might lead into a very compelling storyline between the student and master that I'm looking forward to, so we'll see. But yeah, Momoshiki is also a jobber, bro just doesn't have a Shinjutsu so far, which is crazy. I thought bro had at least one with the future sight, but apparently not, so And I do wonder because this just came to me as well, because Boruto isn't able to use any of Momoshiki's abilities by himself. Yes, he was able to trigger the ability to see the future, but based on what Momoshiki said, it's more so that Boruto just saw into the futures that he was able to see, and this was more so a byproduct of the karma merging with Boruto, and their brainwaves kind of mixing together. Aside from that, Boruto isn't able to use any of Momoshiki's abilities, and I think the reason why is because Momoshiki doesn't have a Shinjutsu. So maybe, and this is just a possibility, it is the case that only Shinjutsu abilities are transferred to the vessel, which is also why every ability that was transferred to the cyborgs using Shibai cells were Shinjutsu, not any random ability that Shibai also possessed. So that explains why Kawaki is able to use Ishiki's abilities, because both of them are Shinjutsu, Tsukinai Kona and Dankokuten. So Boruto might never get all that flashy stuff that Momoshiki was able to use, such as the dogs, the golem, the firebird, Kinshiki's chakra weapons, and maybe even his ability to absorb things and multiply them. That also possibly isn't a Shinjutsu. But that's just a wild theory that just came to mind, so don't think too much about it. Now the next question is there a reason why Ada and Damon wear celestial themed jewelry? And Ikimoto says, I wanted to create an impression of them standing out a little from the world of Naruto and Boruto. And since there are two characters with extraordinary abilities, I thought a cosmic motif would suit their design. And this, of course, is referring to the stars and the moon and all that stuff, all that jewelry on Damon and Ada. So that's pretty much it. The next one says, please tell me about the interaction between the two when Boruto changed the way he called Sasuke. Hikimoto then says, by escaping with Sasuke, Boruto became even more aware that Sasuke is my master and I am his student. Boruto, who tends to start with the formalities, started calling Sasuke master the day after they left the village. Sasuke was reluctant at first, but he gradually came to accept it, since it was a fact that he was Boruto's master. So yeah, Boruto started calling Sasuke master because he finally realized that Sasuke was his master. That's pretty much it. The next one says, what is Kawaki's favorite flavor of taiyaki? And I hope I pronounced that right. Anyways, Hikimoto then says, although the flavor was chocolate at first, it didn't take long for me to finally come to the conclusion that the bean paste flavor was the best. So yeah, for anyone who's concerned, Kawaki's favorite flavor of taiyaki is the bean paste flavor. There was also this question about where does and how does Himawari live after part 1, because of course, no parents, no brother, no one that cares apparently, and the answer provided was that at her request, she lives alone in her family home. She feels that they will somehow return one day and wants to protect their home until that happens. And to be honest, I did find this a tad bit crazy because Himawari staying at home doesn't really matter. It's not really a problem, but her being there by herself is a bit crazy because unless Hanabi is married with kids or maybe has a boyfriend, she should have at least stayed there with Himawari, you know, as the parental figure. I do think that makes sense, but maybe she has other responsibilities. I guess we'll see. But I'm also sure that they have servants over at the Hyuga Palace or whatever they want to call it. They could have sent someone over there to, you know, stay with her, you know, and take care of the house. Who knows? Maybe Himawari doesn't want that either. I'm also not surprised that Kawaki isn't there anymore because based on what was shown in chapter 2, I believe, with their relationship, it doesn't seem like it's particularly good. So yeah, it seems like Himawari is taking a walk in her father's shoe to some extent, minus the discrimination, I would think. But yeah, with that said, that's it for the video. Let me know your thoughts down below. Do you think, you know, everything makes sense here that was stated by Hikimoto, or do you disagree with some of it? And also, do you disagree with my theory on the entire, you know, Tail Beast stuff with Kage and all that stuff? Let me know in the comment section, and you know, we can discuss it down below. Again, with that said, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.